Hello everyone and welcome to this episode of Ignition Time. Could good news be bad news for the Biden infrastructure plan? In this video, I'll tell you exactly what that means. Welcome to this channel everyone. If you learned something new from this video, please click the like button. Please subscribe. It really helps out the YouTube algorithm. I would really appreciate that. Let's get started. The latest unemployment numbers emerged. Well over 900,000 jobs were gained in the United States compared to an expected 675,000 jobs. And even though this is good news on the one hand, the Republicans could use this to essentially combat the Democrats and say, hey, we don't need more spending. The economy is already improving and things are already getting back on track. But the interesting thing here is that individuals in travel, leisure, entertainment, and hospitality, individuals who've been left behind, could end up being the beneficiaries of the infrastructure plan. Because as far as President Biden is concerned, there'll be 19 million new jobs created, a majority of them for blue-collar workers, what President Biden calls a blue-collar blueprint. But again, could good news from the unemployment numbers end up being bad news for the Biden administration? In a brand new article from Politico, you'll see this headline on your screen: Biden's spending plans collide with the resurgent US economy. The numbers signal, meaning the latest unemployment numbers signal, that the US is well on its way towards a revival, one that's widely expected to reach record levels later this year. In fact, let's show you this image, and this was reporting from CNBC about the actual jobs numbers that emerged. These are pretty incredible numbers, and I'll quote Politico. Politico says more than 916,000 Americans returned to work in March, and this was far surpassing consensus expectations, and this marked the biggest jump in employment since the summer as Americans got vaccinated and more states started to reopen, more businesses reopened. The overall unemployment rate is now down to 6%. We still have a ways to go before we reach an unemployment rate of 3%, which is where we were prior to the pandemic, but these are definitely encouraging signs. Close to 1 million people essentially got their jobs back, and close to 1 million people got employed in March of this year. Pretty incredible numbers. So these numbers actually make the case as far as the Republicans are concerned. Here's a comment from Congressman Kevin Brady from Texas. He's a top Republican on the House Ways and Means Committee. He said this: spending at a much smaller level but better targeted would have better bang for the buck. We are wasting too much of these dollars in areas that frankly are not related to the recovery. And many conservative individuals are now starting to come out against the American jobs plan. Here's a comment from Brian Riedel, who's a senior fellow at the right-leaning Manhattan Institute. I don't see much of a stimulus or jobs argument going very far, even as some try to make it. He's referring to the president. The economic outlook is strong for the second half of the year, and it would have been strong without the next stimulus bill. In the meantime, the Democrats, as you would expect, support the American jobs plan. Here's a comment from Congressman Don Beyer, who's a Democrat from Virginia. He leads the Joint Economic Committee. We're not going to go fix 10,000 bridges just to get people to work. We're going to fix them because there's 10,000 bridges that need to be fixed. He also says, even if there were no stimulus argument to be made, that's a very powerful argument to be made that the American jobs plan is necessary. Maybe you would call it something else. He says, you just call it the infrastructure plan. And Larry Summers, the former US Treasury Secretary, who criticized the earlier spending with the American Rescue Plan because he feared that it would cause inflation, actually came out in support of the American jobs plan. He said this: I don't think that it exacerbates the overheating concern I've expressed in an important way. That's just a fancy way of saying I don't think it's going to cause inflation because it's spread out over 8 years. It's very interesting how these economists talk using pretty fancy language. That's why you come to me, because I try and break it down for you. And keep in mind that although Larry Summers was critical of the stimulus plan because he feared it would spark inflation, again, he supports the infrastructure plan, and he said the infrastructure plan is not about short-term injecting money into the economy, but creating the infrastructures and the institutions that success in the 21st century requires. Now, speaking of success in the 21st century, the latest March unemployment numbers were encouraging, like I mentioned at the start of this video. Here's the headline of an article from Fox Business. US Labor Secretary Marty Walsh encouraged by the March jobs report, but said there's still more work to do. Like I mentioned, employers added almost 1 million jobs, 916,000 jobs in March, and this is encouraging news. Let's actually check out some important comments from Marty Walsh as he highlights the numbers in the latest March jobs report. Let's roll the tape and hear Marty Walsh on the podium in the White House press briefing room, which I find quite interesting because the prior US Labor Secretary was never seen in the White House press briefing room. But this is a different administration and this is a different experience in the White House press briefing room. Let's roll the tape and hear from the US Labor Secretary, the man in charge of unemployment benefits across the country, the new US Labor Secretary, Marty Walsh. Let's watch.
The news today, under the President's leadership through the American Rescue Plan, America's workforce is climbing out of a deep hole that COVID has put us in. Our recovery is building momentum, and many more Americans are certainly returning to work, as we can see. But we still have a long way to go, and there's a lot of work to do. Today's Bureau of Labor Statistics reported that the American economy added 916,000 jobs in the month of March. The unemployment rate edged down to 6% from 6.2% in February. That's certainly good news for over 900,000 working men and women and families in this country. We saw significant job growth in most sectors of our economy, and it's clear that the national vaccine program is not only saving lives, but it's enabling more people to get back to work. Relief checks and expanded unemployment benefits are not only putting food on the table, they're also stimulating our local economy. The supports that are being put in place for rent, mortgages, child care, schools, small businesses, and emergency paid leave are giving workers the security they need to hold on and start planning for a better future. The American Rescue Plan certainly has had positive effects across our economy, laying down the foundation for continued recovery. At the same time, over 8 million jobs that existed a year ago today are yet to return. Millions of people in this country are still hurting, and disparities within the workforce continues to be a major concern. The African American unemployment rate in March was 9.6%. The Hispanic rate was 7.9%, compared to the 5.4% for whites.
Now, in the next segment, you'll see some additional comments from Marty Walsh, where he highlights the inequality of work and the uneven nature of the economic recovery because certain groups have been impacted more than others. This is one of the reasons I have a lot of confidence in Marty Walsh, because I believe he's looking at the numbers and trying to do the best he can given the complex situation we are in, and given the fact that things are gradually starting to get better. I think the focus on the inequality, so that the emphasis can be on those who need it the most, is indeed a good focus. Let's hear from Marty Walsh one more time.
In addition, barriers to the labor force participation for women continue to be a problem that has been exposed and exacerbated during this pandemic. We must continue to address the fact that working people and communities already suffering the most from inequality were hit the hardest during the COVID illness and job loss. That's why American Jobs Plan proposed by the President Biden this week is so vital to our future. It tackles each of these issues head on and with bold action. The plan offers a necessary path forward towards sustainable economic growth that is robust, competitive, and inclusive. As a former mayor, as Jen mentioned, as a former mayor, I know all about infrastructure needs. This plan would move us into the 21st century and to the forefront of the world in transportation, in clean energy, in high-speed internet, and would create millions of good jobs all across the United States. A report issued by Georgetown University's Center on Education and Workforce found that the American Job Plan would create over 8 million jobs for people with just a high school diploma alone. It would increase the share of infrastructure jobs from 11% to 14% of the jobs in this country, reviving the blue-collar, middle-class economy and all across our country. As Labor Secretary, I'm thrilled by the investment it would make for American workers in their skills, in their opportunities, and in their right to organize and advocate for better paying working conditions and jobs. Those investments will create and open up access to good manufacturing and construction jobs. There's also a major investment in our caring professionals, an industry where 1 in 6 workers, who are disproportionately women of color, live in poverty. We've seen how much our families depend on child care and seniors' care over the last year. Those skilled, compassionate workers need and deserve a better deal. The American Jobs Plan would also double the number of registered apprenticeships to over 1 million, while ensuring these programs reach those who have been left out in the past.
That's it, everyone. Let me know if you think good news can end up becoming bad news for the Biden administration. Let me know what you think of the new comments from the US Labor Secretary in the White House press briefing room. Quite unusual, not something we've seen over the past 4 years. And let me know what you think of him and what does your gut tell you about the efforts from Marty Walsh when it comes to the unemployment system and the future of unemployment. Marty has also talked about the importance of automatic stabilizers in the past, and you have heard me talk about that. A future in which unemployment benefits are linked to economic numbers and not tied to political shenanigans, which is what we saw in the second half of last year. Thank you so much for watching. Please click the like button, please subscribe, please enable notifications. It really helps out the YouTube algorithm, and you'll get the latest updates about the country, the economy, as well as your money, so that you can keep track of everything that's going on in DC and you can make the right decisions and you can be informed. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next episode of Ignition Time. Take care. Bye.